Welcome to the H Club London celebration of World Book Night. My name is Mark Heywood, as you can probably see on the screen. I'll be your host this evening. Last year I hosted this event from the fourth floor, the Oak Room of H Club London, and I'm thrilled to be back this year with a fantastic lineup of guests. For those of you that haven't heard of H Club London, we'd love to welcome you back in person when we reopen. It's a great club chock full of creatives right in the heart of London. We do have a sister club in Los Angeles, and some of those members are tuning in as well tonight. Just a few things before we begin, a bit of housekeeping if I may. Firstly, a massive thanks to Waterstones for partnering with us today for books that are being read out by the people that wrote them, and I'll make it clear who those people are. If you use at the checkout on the Waterstones website the code HClub, you'll get a discount on buying those books between now and the end of April. I'll remind you about that a couple of times as we go. Secondly, World Book Night is an attempt to encourage grown-ups to read for pleasure. The statistics show quite a bleak picture that too few of us actually do that. Although there was a report that came out today that says 1 in 3 of us is now reading more for pleasure than we did before the lockdown. So just when you thought it was all dark news, there is some good news in terms of us reading. Tonight, you, the audience, you're in for a real treat. I've got some incredible guests who are either reading from books that they themselves wrote or books that they love and mean something to them. Thirdly, just because we're online doesn't mean we are pre-watershed. There may be some profanity in the next hour or so. Usually by me if the technology fails us, but I just wanted to put that out there in case you have some mini adults who are running around that you don't want to hear swear words. Now, normally when we run events like this, the reader would be met by thunderous applause at the end of their passage that they read out. But just because we can't see or hear you doesn't mean you can't support the people who are participating tonight. So feel free to give out a massive round of applause in your own homes, and also feel free to give us some love in the chat box. I know that people will really, really appreciate it. Now, my job is to keep things moving and also to welcome each guest. We are going to try and have this all wrapped up by 8 o'clock, so that those of you that wish to participate in the 8 o'clock round of applause for NHS and frontline healthcare workers can do so. So let me, in that case, get cracking. First up, we have author Ruth Hogan. Now, she's going to be reading from her own novel, Queenie Malone's Paradise Hotel. Now, this is one of the books on the official World Book Night 2020 list. So you're in for a real treat.
Ruth, welcome. It's over to you.
The taxi pulled up outside a splendid-looking house with a green and white sign hanging on an ornate metal bracket over the door. The Paradise Hotel was a burst of high summer in a bleak midwinter street. The front of the house was bedecked with hanging baskets of roaring red geraniums, fuchsias. Tilly thought that whoever lived here must be very special indeed to make such beautiful blooms grow in winter. Her mother thought that the person who lived here had spent an awful lot of money on plastic flowers. The sign proclaimed this person to be one Queenie Malone, and just below a first floor window, a huge Union Jack was waving from a diagonal flagpole. Tilly was impressed. Do you think the Queen stays here on her holidays? Her mother pushed open the first of the 2 front doors, and once they were both inside the lobby, and she had checked her appearance in the glass, she rang the doorbell on the inner door. Tilly was jiggling to the other in excitement, the glass door panels, to see if anyone was coming. Tilly, do stand still. Anyone would think you've got ants in your pants. Tilly knew they must be on holiday for her mother to be saying pants in a public place, so she couldn't resist pushing the joke a little further. Or nits in my knickers. The sentence containing both the word knickers and nits, so bringing together the rude and the repulsive, was in Tilly's eyes a recipe for the knickerbocker glory of all jokes, and she collapsed into a fit of giggles at her own comedy genius. Even her mother was trying not to laugh. At the sound of footsteps coming from inside the house, her mother grabbed Tilly's hand and shook her as though to throw off the giggles, and they both stood to attention, although the shadow of a grin was still dancing across her mother's face. The woman who opened the door was unforgettable in every way. Her hair, which was the colour of Parma Violet sweets, was swept into an immaculate candy floss bouffant. Her matching eyeshadow, lipstick and nail polish were a toning shade of frosted lilac, and on her bosom shelf rested several strands of pearls and an enormous sparkling brooch in the shape of a peacock. The rings on her fingers twinkled like the crown jewels. She was wearing a tight-fitting plain cotton dress that was a striking shade of fuchsia. Her perfume smelled of gardenias. Tilly thought she was beautiful. Good afternoon, ladies, and welcome to the Paradise Hotel. And that's the book.
Thank you very much, Ruth, reading from her own novel, Queenie Malone's Paradise Hotel. Thank you very much, Ruth. Please give Ruth some love in the comments box, and also, if you can, give her a big shout out as well. And more importantly, buy the book. It's fantastic. Ruth, thank you very much for that. Next up, we have, all the way from the fabulously glamorous Los Angeles, where she's currently residing, actor Simone Ashley from, I'm sure you've seen it, from Sex Education. Tonight, she's going to be reading from John Berger's book, Why Look at Animals, all the way from Los Angeles. Simone, welcome. Over to you.
Hi. Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to be reading from Why Look at Animals by John Berger, and it's a series of a lot of short stories about our relationship with animals and nature. And this one's called Mouse Story. The mouse in the cage holds his head on one side as if he was wearing a cap. His front paws with their 4 fingers are planted firmly on the ground either side of his muzzle. His ears are perked up and his tail, stretched out far behind him, is pressed firmly on the floor of the cage. His heart's beating very fast and he is frightened when the man lifts up the cage. Yet he doesn't hide behind the spring. He doesn't cringe. He holds his head a cock and he stares back. For the first time, a name for the mouse comes in the man's head. Alfredo, he calls him. He puts the cage on the kitchen table beside his coffee cup. Later, the man goes to the field, kneels down, places the cage on the grass, and holds the door, which is the 4th wall of the cell, open. The mouse approaches the open wall, raises his head, and leaps. He does not scuttle. He does not dart. He flies. Relative to his size, he leaps higher and further than a kangaroo. He leaps like a mouse who has been freed. With 3 leaps, he has covered more than 5 meters. And the man, still on his knees, watches the mouse, he called Alfredo, leap again and again into the sky. The following morning, the man's bread has not been touched, and the man believes the mouse in the cage may be the last one. Kneeling in the field outside the village, holding the door open, the man waits again. It takes the new mouse a long while to realize he can leap. When he finally does, he scuttles into the thickest and nearest tuft of grass, and the man feels a slight yet sharp pang of disappointment. He had been hoping to see one more time in his life a prisoner fly, a prisoner realize his dream of freedom.
Simone, thank you very much for that lovely reading from a book of short stories called Why Look at Animals by John Berger. Please give Simone some love in the comments box. Simone, that was great. Thank you very much. Next up, and a profanity alert for you by what I'm about to say. So if you want to put your hands over the ears of little people, feel free to do so now. Next up, we have author John Niven reading from his own book, the wonderfully titled The Fuck It List. John, welcome. Over to you.
Swearing even in the title, I'm afraid. Okay, the novel's set in 2026 in America on the assumption that it's now Ivanka who is president, following 2 terms of Donald Trump. So we're about to have a scene from Veterans Day. in Washington. Huge crowds were packed into the bleachers, waving their flags, cheering in their red MAGA hats as they watched the soldiers and the hardware rumble past. Tanks, howitzers, assault vehicles, rocket launchers, thousands of troops, all lumbering away from the White House towards the Capitol. The lead tanks were huge M1 Abrams battle tanks, each weighing 60 short tons. Soldiers stood up through the open hatches, rigidly saluting the podium. You could faintly hear the cheers in the background, USA, 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 as the camera swung over the rows of spectators. And here it was, the real America, the people who'd traveled from Florida, from Nebraska, from Kentucky, and yes, from here, from Indiana, up to Washington, spending money they could ill afford to pay their respects on Veterans Day. They were cold and wet and mostly old and fat, and they were wrapped in thin, cheap coats with the cardboard signs saying, God bless the Trumps, death to Democrats, and inevitably, lock her up. The last one increasingly puzzling to Frank, as former Senator Clinton had died peacefully in her sleep 3 years ago. Perhaps they feared a ghost situation, a zombie Hillary clawing her way out of the grave, trying to take their guns and delete more emails. There had been no tanks for the first few years of the parade. The roads couldn't handle it. One of Trump's first acts early in his second term had been to order a multi-billion-dollar program to widen and strengthen Pennsylvania Avenue to accommodate the monsters every November. As Frank remembered this, as if on cue, the cameras cut to the presidential podium. President Trump and her husband, Greg, her second husband, the first, Jared, was still languishing on Rikers Island, having taken the fall for an awful lot of shit. Vice President Hannity and his wife were on her left, and on her right, still towering over the others, even at 80, Donald and his new wife, his fourth wife, Crystal, her belly swollen in the final trimester of her pregnancy. Thunder erupted suddenly as 3 fighter planes smashed through the sky above the parade. Trump put a protective hand on Ivanka's shoulder as he shouted into her ear over the jet roar, his finger jabbing into the sky. Ivanka wore a cream overcoat and fur hat. Her father his trademark black overcoat and red tie. Trump looked down at the vast cheering crowd and gave them his signature thumbs up. They went wild. It had been a masterstroke, you had to admit, firing Pence halfway through his second term and nominating Ivanka as VP before resigning the office due to ill health. Ivanka automatically became president and had 18 months in the saddle before she had to fight an election. Obviously, one of her first acts in office had been to pardon her father of the multitude of charges he faced.
John Niven reading from the non-fiction book there, The Fuck It List. If that happens, John, I think people will know where to come. In fact, if it does happen, I wouldn't be at all surprised. So thank you for that. Please give John some love in the comments box. Now, we said in the blurb running up to this event that we would have potentially a special guest. We've got one right now. I am delighted to announce, and reading from Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for star of stage and screen, Tim McInerney. Tim, but welcome to World Book Night.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be here. Yeah, this is one of the best books ever written. So I hope I do it justice. Bleak House, Chapter 1, In Chancery. London, Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather. As much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. And it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes, gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs undistinguishable in mire, horses scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers, foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke. adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. Fog everywhere, fog up the river where it flows among green aits and meadows, fog down the river where it rolls defiled among the tears of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog on the Essex marshes, fog on the Kentish heights, fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats, fog in the eyes and throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners, wheezing by the firesides of their wards, fog in the stem and bowl of the afternoon pipe of the wrathful skipper down in his close cabin, fog cruelly pinching the toes and fingers of his shivering little prentice boy on deck, chance people on the bridges peeping over the parapets into a nether sky of fog, with fog all around them, as if they were up in a balloon and hanging in the misty clouds. Gas looming through the fog in divers places in the streets, much as the sun may from the spongy fields be seen to loom by husbandman and ploughboy. Most of the shops lighted 2 hours before their time, as the gas seems to know, for it has a haggard and unwilling look. The raw afternoon is rawest, and the dense fog is densest, and the muddy streets are muddiest near that leaden-headed old obstruction, appropriate ornament for the threshold of a leaden-headed old corporation, Temple Bar. And hard by Temple Bar, in Lincoln's Inn Hall, at the very heart of the fog, sits the Lord High Chancellor in his High Court of Chancery. Never can there come fog too thick, never can there come mud and mire too deep to assort with the groping and floundering condition which this High Court of Chancery, most pestilent of hoary sinners, holds this day in the sight of heaven and earth. Read Dickens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. That was a real treat. Anybody, just give me some love. We should do this every week, right? This is fantastic. This is like virtual Jackanory. This is absolutely wonderful. Tim, a real treat. And as Tim says, read Dickens. It's a fantastic book. All right, moving on. Another author for you this time. This time I'm delighted that we can be joined by Lucy Diamond, who is reading from her own book, An Almost Perfect Holiday. Lucy, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Mark. This is my new book set in Falmouth, and it's about the guests who are staying in 3 neighbouring holiday cottages. The bit I'm going to read is from the point of view of Izzy. She's 15 and she's on holiday with her mum, her brother, her mum's new boyfriend George, and his annoying daughter. So she's not expecting it to be the greatest holiday of her life. And here's one of the reasons why. As for George, well, he was a whole other problem. Izzy still burned with embarrassment whenever she thought about the first time she'd seen him back in the spring. She'd been out at Wagamama in town for Teddy's birthday treat, and a group of them were sitting at a table by the window, cracking open their chopsticks and tucking in steaming mounds of yakisoba as the conversation turned to boys at school. Izzy had kept quiet, not really having anything to contribute, until Lily elbowed her and said, "Go on then, who do you fancy at school is?" "God, no one at school," Izzy said, possibly too defensively. "They're all so lame and immature. Give me an older guy any day." She wasn't even sure where this had come from. A bluster, a bluff, to try and throw the limelight away from herself. There was no older guy in her mind whatsoever. The whole idea of falling in love with anyone seemed remote and impossible. It was something for other people to get weird about. Unfortunately, her friends took her comment at face value. "What, an older guy like him?" Ted sniggered, pointing across the restaurant to where an elderly gentleman with a magnificent curly white moustache sat alone with a bowl of noodle soup. The others fell about tittering, and Izzy felt her face grow hot. She had very pale skin that went from milk to lobster in the space of seconds. "Not like him, like..." Izzy scoured the restaurant for inspiration. Absolutely none. Then turned her attention to the world outside. "Like him," she said triumphantly, pointing a chopstick. They'd all stared at the good-looking guy striding confidently along Clarence Street in dark jeans with a cool indigo shirt. OK, so he was middle-aged, she realised in the next moment, but he was undeniably handsome, tall, and with his sexy sort of walk. Yeah, he'd do. Said Miko approvingly, and Izzy's tension eased a fraction. That's definitely a man, not a boy. And that might have been the end of it, the moment slipping away and forgotten as a new topic surfaced. If it hadn't been for the fact that just then, as they were all looking at the man, a woman approached him. Izzy gulped in a stunned breath and watched with disbelief as the smiling woman touched a hand to the man's arm. In the next moment, the two of them were locked in a passionate kiss. Izzy's mouth dried to chalk. What the hell? No way, Tej whooped. Is that your mum? Are you kidding me? Lily squawked. What? So that's your dad? No, Izzy cried, her face scorching. I don't fancy my dad. Jesus. She blinked and stared, unable to believe what she was seeing, as her mum and this man, this handsome indigo-shirted man, eventually disentangled from their kiss and went into a nearby cafe together. Her heart was going nuts. Mum was dating? Since when? Oh my God. Miko was laughing. You fancy your mum's new boyfriend? Awkward. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Lucy Diamond, thank you very much for that extract from An Almost Perfect Holiday. Thank you, Lucy. How are you all doing? Enjoying the show? I know I am. This is fantastic. It's an absolute privilege to be with all these amazing readers tonight. Next up, we're going to move on. Next up is author, actor, and impressionist Ronni Ancona, reading from Nora Ephron's I Remember Nothing. Ronni, first of all, welcome, and now over to you.
Hello, Mark. Well, yes, it's quite a light book, this, but I do love Nora Ephron, and she makes me laugh a lot. And this is I'm going to read a couple of excerpts of her negotiating a party. And the first one is, have we met? Have we met? I think we've met, but I can't be sure. We were introduced, but I didn't catch your name because it's so noisy at this party. I'm going to assume we know each other, and I'm going to say, nice to meet you. If I say, nice to meet you, I know what will happen. You'll say, we've met. You'll say, we've met, in a sort of aggressive, irritable tone. And you won't even tell me your name, so I can recover in some way. So I'm not going to say, nice to meet you. I'm going to say, nice to see you. I'll have a big smile on my face. I won't look desperate. But what I'll be thinking is, please throw me your name. Please, please, please. Give me a hint. My husband is likely to walk up and I'll have to introduce you, and I won't be able to. And you'll know that I have no idea who you are, even though we probably spent an entire weekend together on a boat in 1984. I have a secret signal with my husband that involves my pinching him very hard on the upper arm. The signal means, throw your name at this person because I have no idea who I'm talking to. But my husband always forgets the secret signal and can't be counted on to respond to my pinching, even when it produces a bruise. I would like to chew my husband out about his forgetfulness on this point, but I'm not exactly in a position to do so, since I myself have forgotten, if I ever knew it, the name of the person I'm talking to. Old friends. Old friends, we must be. You're delighted to see me. I'm delighted to see you. But who are you? Oh my God, you're Ellen. I can't believe it. Ellen. Ellen, how are you? It's been, how long has it been? I'd like to suggest that the reason I didn't recognize you right off the bat is that you've done something to your hair, but you've done nothing to your hair, nothing that would excuse my not recognizing you. What you've actually done is gotten older. I don't believe it. You used to be my age and now you're much, 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 much older than I am. You could be my mother. Unless, of course, I look as old as you and I don't know it, which is not possible. Or is it? Because I'm looking around the room and I notice that everyone in it looks like someone, and when I try to figure out exactly who that someone is, it turns out to be a former version of herself. A thinner version, or a healthier version, or a pre-plastic surgery version or a taller version. If this is true of everyone, it must be true of me, mustn't it? But never mind. You're speaking. Maggie, you say. It's been so long. I'm not Maggie, I say. Oh my God, you say. It's you. I didn't recognize you. You've done something to your hair. That's that.
I Remember Nothing by Nora Ephron, read by Ronni Ancona. Ronni, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. Next up, we have another actor, Anthony Welsh, seen most recently in The Trial of Christine Keeler, reading from Richard Bach's Illusions. Anthony, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. Yeah, I read this book when I was a teenager, and I've revisited it so many times because of its quite simple idea, but really well articulated. And the scene or the chapter I'm going to read is between two characters by the name of Richard and Donald. Donald is a messiah who has quit his job because of all the trouble that being a messiah brings. And Richard is coming into his own as to his own abilities. It was an easy, warm afternoon between rain showers. Sidewalks wet on our way out of town. You can walk through walls, can't you, Don? No. When you say no to something I know is yes, that means you don't like the way I said the question. We certainly are observant, aren't we? He said. Is the problem with walk or with walls? Yes, and worse. Your question presumes that I exist in one limited place-time and move to another place-time. I'm not in the mood to accept your presumptions about me. I frowned. He knew why I was asking. Why didn't he just answer me straight and let me go on to finding out how he does these things? That's my little way of helping you be precise in your thinking, he said mildly. Okay, you can make it appear that you can walk through walls if you want. Is that a better question? Yes, better. But if you want to be precise, don't tell me. I know how to say what I mean. Here is my question. How is it that you can move the illusion of a limited sense of identity expressed in this belief of a space-time continuum as your body through the illusion of material restriction that is called a wall? Well done, he said. When you ask the question properly, it answers itself, doesn't it? No, the question hasn't answered itself. How do you walk through walls? Richard, you had it nearly right and then blew it all to pieces. I cannot walk through walls. When you say that, you're assuming I don't assume at all. And if I do assume them, the answer is I can't. But it's so hard to put everything so precisely done. Don't you know what I mean? So just because something's hard, you don't try to do it. Walking was hard at first, but you practiced at it and now you make it look easy. I sighed. Yeah, okay, forget the question. I'll forget it. My question is, can you? He looked at me as though he hadn't a care in the world. So you're saying that body is illusion and wall is illusion, but identity is real and that can't be hemmed by illusions. I'm not saying that, you're saying that. But it's true, naturally, he said. How do you do it? Richard, you don't do anything. You see it done already, and it is. Gee, that sounds easy. It's like walking. You wonder if it became hard for you to learn. Don, walking through walls, it isn't hard for me now. It is impossible. Do you think that maybe if you say impossible over and over again 1,000 times, that suddenly hard things will come easy for you? I'm sorry, it is possible, and I'll do it when it's right for me to do it. He walks on water, folks, and he's discouraged because he doesn't walk through walls. But that was easy, and this, argue for your limitations, and you get to keep them. He sang. So,
Illusions by Richard Brown, read by Anthony Welsh. Anthony, thank you so much for that. A couple of people have asked in the comments box whether we'll be, could we read out the names of the books that are being read out tonight? Absolutely, we'll put that on the website. So just make a note of H Club London website. You can Google that. We'll put out some information about the books that people read out tonight. And also don't forget that we do have that Waterstones discount code, which you're going to need for my next guest, because next I'm delighted to welcome author Joanna Trollop, who is reading from her own novel, Mum and Dad. Joanna, welcome to World Book Night. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome to everybody. It's fantastic to be part of this lineup. Now, Mum and Dad is really about the sandwich generation. So those are people whose parents are falling to pieces one end of their lives, and their teenage children are very needy and demanding, and probably the women are working. And Katie falls into that category. I'm going to read a speech of hers. And Katie is probably in her early 40s. She's got 3 daughters, and she is a very significant libel lawyer. I've got friends, Katie said, who've been dealing with parent crises forever. Disabled parents, sick parents, demented parents, alcoholic parents, just generally hopeless parents. And I've sympathized. I've made all the right noises. I've done all the supportive things, like have their children to stay. I've made casseroles. I've generally done my bit. But while I was doing it, I suppose I was thinking all the time that because Mum and Dad had made this very distinct and different decision to move to Spain, that they'd made themselves remote from all the usual responsibilities of family, and that we, children, were somehow free of the consequences of their choices. But we aren't, are we? This happens out of the blue, and suddenly we are landed with our parents, and they're kind of infantilized, aren't they? And looking to us like fledglings. It's awful. And I feel extra awful that I didn't see it coming, that I pretty much chose not to see it coming. I mean, last night, I wondered if I should go into Mum's room to see if she was okay, and I didn't. I decided not to, because if I'm honest, I didn't want to. I didn't make myself. But she's seen Dad. Mum must know the score. She must know it's very unlikely he'll recover enough to be able to run the vineyard again. And that must scare her. I mean, what's the future for her? And for Dad? What's Dad thinking? It's beyond awful for them. It really is. Here they are, in the ruins of what once looked like a bold and adventurous dream. One stroke and crash, the whole house of cards collapses. No wonder they're frightened. As frightened as we are. Thank you.
Joanna, thank you. More importantly, that was wonderful. That was Mum and Dad by Joanna. We're around about the halfway mark, so let's just kind of recap that Waterstones discount code. It is H Club. So if you want to read or you want to buy any of the books that are being read out by the people that wrote them tonight, such as Mum and Dad by Joanna, then just use H Club as the discount code when you check out. And also, there's lots of love coming through on the webinar chat room. That doesn't mean you can't share the love on social media. So if you want to take some photos, tag some of the incredible guests that we've got who are writing, let's spread this far and wide. And I'm going to start a special campaign to try and get this virtual Jackanory session more often than once a year. Joanna, thank you so much for that. Right, let's move on. Next up, we have actor Ophelia Lovibond. Now, whether you know her from W1A or Guardians of the Galaxy, it is an absolute pleasure to have her with us. She is reading from Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. Ophelia, welcome to World Book Night.
Thank you very much. It's very lovely to be here. I chose this book because I just think Joan Didion can do no wrong. It follows a woman living in LA called Mariah Wyeth, and she's starting to feel more and more disconnected from her surroundings and ultimately herself. And this is a little chapter that shows that. Everything Mariah could think to do in the town, she had already done. She had checked into the motel. She had eaten crab at the marina. At 3 p.m, she had been the only customer in the marina restaurant, and it had been a dispiriting 30 or 40 minutes, sliced beets staining the crab legs, and a couple of waitresses arguing listlessly and a piped medley from Showboat. After that, she had walked on the gravelly sand, and she had driven aimlessly to Port Hunumi and back to Oxnard, and now she sat on a bench in the downtown plaza, watching some boys in ragged Levi jackets and dark goggles who sat on the grass near her car. Their Harleys were pulled up to the curb, and they seemed to be passing a joint with furtive daring, and every now and then they would look over at her and laugh. Because there was an oil fire somewhere to the north, a yellow haze hung over the town, a stillness over the plaza. On the next bench, an old man coughed soundlessly, spit phlegm that seemed to hang heavy in the air. A woman in a nurse's uniform wheeled a bundled neuter figure silently past the hedges of dead camellias. Mariah closed her eyes and imagined the woman coming toward her with a hypodermic needle. When she opened her eyes again, the boys in the Levi jackets seemed to be rifling the glove compartments of parked cars. To hear the sound of her own footsteps, Mariah stood up and walked to the payphone by the public toilet and asked the operator to try the number in Los Angeles again. She would tell him she could not wait. She would tell him she was sitting in a park watching some hoods rifling cars and she could not wait. Maybe she would not feel this way if she talked to him. Maybe he would make her laugh. Maybe she would hear his voice and the silence would break. The woman in the nurse's uniform would speak to her charge and the boys would get on their Harleys and roar off. But when the operator got to the studio, a voice said only that Mr. Goodwin could not be reached. When she hung up the phone, the silence was absolute. The boys in the Levi jackets were all watching her now, because they were standing around her car. They knew it was her car. They had watched her lock it. They were trying various keys. They were watching to see what she would do. As if in slowed motion, she began walking across the grass toward the car. And as she got closer, they melted back, formed a semicircle. Abstractly, she admired the way that she and they together were evolving a choreography, hearing the same silent beat. She kept her eyes steady, her pace even. And when she found herself unlocking the car under their blank gaze, it was with extreme deliberation. As she slid into the driver's seat, she stared directly at each of them, one by one. And in that instant of total complicity, one of them leaned across the hood and raised a hand in recognition of what had passed between them, his palm out, inscribing an arc in the air. Later, those few minutes in the plaza in Oxnard would come back to Mariah, and she would replay them, change the scenario. It ended that way badly or well, depending on what you wanted.
Ophelia, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. That was Play It As It Lays. And again, we'll put all of the titles up online. Okay, people fancy some more? I know I do. Let's keep going. My next guest is author Derek Owusu. He's reading from his own book, That Reminds Me. So just before I hand over to Derek, just a polite word of warning. This contains subject matter that some of you may find distressing. Derek, welcome to World Book Night. I can't wait to hear you read this. Over to you.
Thank you for having me. This is from towards the ending of That Reminds Me. I look around the reception. I'm feeling so isolated among so many that I have to reach over and calm my shaking hand. Then they go. The melancholy of the music steals the moment, piano keys pressing on a suffering note. The collective joy causes mine to envy, to curl up thirsty. The couple leads an electric slide while I drink. Then I'm home, my brother holding onto my shirt, pulling it tight around my body. My mother stands by the door, anointing oil in hand, the language of her mind struggling to understand. I'm leaning out the window, heaving, breathing, feeling like I'm finally freed from solitary. I'm afraid to turn around. Instead, I keep my eyes on the concrete beneath, imagining my fall, maybe 2 legs broken and no loss of consciousness at all. It's going to be cool, bro, I hear from behind me. P, I say, I just need some space. I'm not letting you go, bro. It's going to be cool. When I wake up, he's asleep by my feet. I can't remember the sound of my brother's laugh. I always listen for it, as they listen for a key in my door, worry thundering floors as feet pace over, and I'm told to keep my bedroom door unlocked. My brother's losing weight like I'm losing blood. He walks into my room and stops at my mattress. He stares at the multiple stab wounds, my blood in pockets all over the naked bed. He's never seen it with sheets off before, and all he can say is, rah. He hasn't looked at me. He turns to leave and I ask, is he okay? Why is he going? Is it me? Nah, he says, and closes my door. I sink to the floor. He once asked me if I think I can beat it. Now he's sure I can't. I'm sitting at a circular table next to a bookshelf I've tried to find comfort in, opposite my nurse, as she tells me about attachment theory. The old books had pages as brown as autumn leaves, crisp under my thumb, their details now falling from my mind as I dwell on cold visits, being caught while downstairs. The only people left to visit are the work well-wishers. My friends haven't dropped me out because they struggle to understand that sometimes my behavior is not my own, disrupting their talk of accountability. This place, with its art and design time drawings on the wall and wake-up calls for medication that leave us lined up in the halls, is purgatory. Too sick for home, but not sick enough for the place where your identity could be swallowed up by the moans. I wanted to be anywhere away from sharp objects and full access to my pills. There were days when I'd fall asleep on my arm and wake up to see my wrist covered with the marks of a desperate escape, and I'd feel nauseous, struggling to understand my want of an exit. And in those moments, I see, for now, this has to be the home for me. Thank you.
Derek, thank you. That was wonderful. That was really good. I'm always struck by the limitations of my own bookcases when I see somebody like Derek on screen. But Derek, thank you very much for that. Next up, we have actor and author Sophie Ward. Now, she's going to be reading from her own book, Love and Other Thought Experiments. Sophie, welcome to World Book Night. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. So I'm going to read from this. It's a book that tells the story of a family over about 100 years, from the middle of the last century to the middle of this one. And every chapter has a different point of view on the same family history. Some of the points of view are unusual, and I won't say whose this is. There are two parts to my life, and they are as different from each other as you are to a stranger who sat next to you on a bus one summer's day, or borrowed a library book you had once read. The before and after of me are not two halves of one, as many lives must be, young and old, child and parent. There is nothing that follows as a natural progression, only a clear division. Of course, were you to meet me in person, you would not notice anything of distinction about me at all, save perhaps a minor imperfection. Introducing myself to you this way, though, through a meeting of minds, as it were, will allow you to understand the very great change in my circumstances. We say meeting of minds, though really it is my mind that is being met. This is not a two-way discovery. Welcome. The difficulties you may experience in understanding my story are to be expected. There is a small comparison to be made between my own transformation and the one you are embarking upon, but only a small one, since your discovery is by conventional means, and mine was, as far as can be told, unique. Yet you will be prey to sudden jolts and shocks, and your already advanced and settled knowledge of the world and its physical constraints will at times obstruct the absorption of new, conflicting information. Still, here you are, embracing the process. We must commend ourselves for our exploratory natures. We will start with the night that everything changed. The first difficulty is how to properly convey the way things happened without tainting your impressions with my current form. You will understand so much more if we can edge a little into my original incarnation and proceed from there. To this end, let us envisage the bedroom of the converted Victorian terrace flat on a warm night in June. The household sleeps, and our small party enters from the garden, lured by the scent of something sweet. That's the end of that bit, and I hope that you get to read the rest. Thank you.
Sophie, thank you. Yes, I think everybody would do a lot worse than choosing to read the rest. That was really great. Thank you so much. A big thank you to Sophie Ward for reading from her own book, Love and Other Thought Experiments. Okay, next up, a real treat for those of you that want some more sex education cast. We've got George Robinson, who is reading from, and I think this is a brilliant book choice, Roald Dahl's Danny, the Champion of the World. George, welcome. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think that, you know, in this time of isolation, we all need to have a bit of escapism, and I don't think there's anyone better at creating a wonderful world of whimsy, quite like Roald Dahl. So here we go. It was very quiet there in the wood. Danny, my father said. Yes, Dad? I've been wondering how a bird manages to keep its balance sitting on a branch when it's asleep. I don't know, Dad, I said. Why? It's very peculiar, he said. What's peculiar? It's peculiar that a bird doesn't topple off its perch as soon as it goes to sleep. After all, if we were sitting on a branch and we went to sleep, we would fall off at once, wouldn't we? Birds have claws and long toes, Dad. I expect they just hold on with those. I know that, Danny, but I still don't understand why the toes keep gripping the perch once the bird is asleep. Surely everything goes limp when you fall asleep. I waited for him to go on. I was just thinking, he said, if a bird can keep its balance when it's asleep, then surely there isn't any reason why the pills should make it fall down. It's doped, I said. Surely it'll fall down when it's doped. But isn't that simply a deeper sort of sleep, he said? Why should we expect it to fall down just because in a deeper sleep? There was a gloomy silence. I should have tested it with the roosters, my father added. Suddenly, the blood seemed to have drained right out of his cheeks. His face was so pale, I thought he might be going to faint. My dad would have tested with the roosters before he did anything else, he said. At that moment, there came a soft thud from the wood behind us. What was that? I asked. Shh. We stood listening. Thump. There's another, I said. There was a deep, muffled sound as though a bag of sand had been dropped to the ground. Thump. They're pheasants, I cried. Wait. No, they must be pheasants, Dad. Thump, thump. You may be right, Danny. We switched on our torches and ran towards the sounds. Where were they? My father said. Over here, Dad. 2 of them were over here. I thought they were this way. Keep looking, they can't be far. We searched for about a minute. Here's one, my father called. When I got to him, he was holding a magnificent cockbird in both of his hands. We examined it closely with our torches. It's doped to high heavens, my father said. It won't wake up for a week. Thump. There was another, I cried. Thump, thump. 2 more, my father yelled. Thump, thump, thump. Jeepers, my father said. Thump, 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 thump. All around us, the pheasants were starting to rain down all over the trees. We began rushing round madly in the dark, sweeping the ground with our torches. Thump, thump, thump. This lot fell almost on top of me. I was right under the tree as they came down, and I found all 3 of them immediately. 2 cocks and a hen. They were limp and warm, the feathers wonderfully soft in the hand. Where shall I put them, Dad? I called out. Lay them here, Danny. Just pile them up where it's light. My father was standing on the edge of the clearing with the moonlight streaming down all over him, and a great bunch of pheasants in each hand. His face was bright, his eyes big and bright and wonderful, and he was staring around him like a child who had just discovered that the whole world was made of chocolate.
Danny, the Champion of the World by Roald Dahl, read there by George Robinson. George, thank you very, very much. Okay, we have 3 more wonderful readings for you. First up, we have broadcaster, journalist and author Dolly Alderson reading from her own book, Everything I Know About Love. Dolly, we're so pleased that you could be with us this evening. It's over to you.
Hello. I feel like this might be the first sort of site-specific theatrical reading that I've ever done of this chapter of Everything I Know About Love, because I'm reading from the first chapter, which is a list of everything I knew about love as a teenager. And I'm in a bedroom. I feel like I had all these thoughts in a bedroom. So if you can just imagine that this is my teenage bedroom. So there's a poster of Will Young here, and there's a collection of glittery gel pens here, and a kind of weirdly huge and varied collection of Beanie Babies behind me, just to set the scene as everything I knew about love as a teenager. Romantic love is the most important and exciting thing in the entire world. If you don't have it when you're a proper grown-up, then you have failed, just like so many of my art teachers, who I have noted are Miss instead of Mrs. and have frizzy hair and ethnic jewellery. It's important to have a lot of sex with a lot of people, but probably no more than 10. When I'm a single woman in London, I will be extremely elegant and slim and wear black dresses and drink martinis, and will only meet men at book launches and at exhibition openings. The mark of true love is when two boys get in a physical fight over you. The sweet spot is drawn blood, but no one having to go to hospital. One day this will happen to me if I'm lucky. It's important to lose your virginity after your 17th birthday, but before your 18th birthday. Literally, even if it's just the day before, that's fine. But if you go into your 18th year still a virgin, you will never have sex. You can snog as many people as you like, and that's fine. It doesn't mean anything. It's just practice. Just a side note, I still believe that, by the way. The coolest boys are always tall and Jewish and have a car. Older boys are the best kind because they're more sophisticated and worldly, and also they have slightly less stringent standards. When friends have boyfriends, they become boring. A friend having a boyfriend is only ever fun if you have a boyfriend too. If you don't ask your friend about their boyfriend at all, they'll eventually get the hint that you find it boring and they'll stop going on about him. It's a good idea to get married a bit later in life and after you've lived a bit, say 27. Farley and I will never fancy the same boy because she likes them short and cheeky like Nigel Harmon, and I like them macho and mysterious like Charlie Simpson from Busted. This is why our friendship will last forever. No moment in my life will ever be as romantic as when me and Lauren were playing that gig on Valentine's Day at that weird pub in St. Albans, and I sang Lover You Should Have Come Over, and Joe Sawyer sat at the front and closed his eyes because earlier we'd talked about Jeff Buckley, and basically he's the only boy I've ever met who fully understands me and where I'm coming from. No moment in my life will ever be as embarrassing as when I tried to kiss Sam Lehman and he pulled away from me and I fell over. No moment in my life will ever be as heartbreaking as when Will Young came out as gay and I had to pretend I was fine about it, but I cried while I burned the leather book I was given for my confirmation in which I had written about our life together. Boys really like it when you say rude things to them and they find it babyish and uncool if you're too nice. When I finally have a boyfriend, little else will matter. Thank you very much.
Dolly, thank you. And it was great that we could connect to you. Thank you very much for that reading of Everything I Know About Love. It's very clear from the love in the comments box that you've enjoyed everything that we've had so far. Another star of stage and screen now, and a big World Book Night welcome to actor Nigel Planer, who's going to be reading from Early Life by Philip Hensher. Nigel, I'm hoping that you're with us. If you are, it's great to have you, and welcome to World Book Night.
Hello, yes. Hello, I'm here standing by. Scenes from an Early Life by Philip Hensher. All you need to know is it's 1971. We're in Bangladesh, and Sadi, the main character, is a little baby. The narrator's voice, he's a baby. That is how it is to be, my grandfather Nana said quietly. Nobody is to make any noise or light a lamp. This house is to seem empty, without interest, vacated. You are not to draw attention to this house. When night falls, we sit in the dark or we go to bed. My grandfather would not share what he knew about what had happened in the businessman's house 2 streets away. There were many such stories in Dhaka that day, for weeks into the future. The rapes and murders of the businessman's family was the one my grandfather knew about. What was that noise? Nana said. He had come through from his study in the front of the house. It is dear little Sadi, Nani said. He was just hungry and he woke up, poor little thing. He can't tell us that he wants something other than by crying, but he's quite all right now. Can't he be kept quiet with the other children, my grandfather said. His eyes went around the room to his 7 daughters, to his daughter-in-law and 3 female cousins. Perhaps he thought too, a dreadful thought of a tableau, his wife and mothers and perhaps even granddaughters too. The mind shrank from it. My wails could be heard in the street when I cried and by the passing soldiers. Poor little Sadi, Mira said. He can't be expected to understand what's happening. We can't tell him not to cry. He wouldn't listen. That's so, my grandfather said, considering. His lawyer's logical brain went through various considerations. He must never be left alone, that's all. Carry him about with you. Not just his mother, but the rest of you girls too. Take turns. If he wants to sleep, put him down, but don't leave him. And have cake to hand at all times. If it begins to look as if he might be thinking of crying, beginning to look like that, no more, then distract him, feed him, interest him, jiggle him. He mustn't cry. Give him cake and mishti doi. Babies like that. From that moment onwards, my aunts took turns looking after me. On the armrest of a chair by them was a terracotta pot of mishti doi, a teaspoon stuck in it. And from time to time, not interrupting her burble of conversation or under-the-breath song, the aunt of the moment would lean forward, dig into the pot, and bring another half teaspoon to my little wrinkled mouth. In the whole of that time, I hardly had the opportunity to cry. No sooner, day or night, had my face begun to move inwards and my brow to furrow than an aunt moved in and embarked on a well-established routine of Sadi distracting, involving the pulling of funny faces, jogging up and down, tickling on the tummy, mine, and regular administration of half teaspoonfuls of mishti doi. I slept contentedly in an atmosphere of love from the March curfew until the day in December that Bangladesh was liberated, and I did not cry. Thank you.
Nigel,
one of my favourite books.
And a contender for Bookcase of the Year from Nigel. I know a lot of you spoke about that in the comments. Okay, we have one more reader for you. We opened with Ruth reading from Queenie Malone's Paradise Hotel, one of the books on the official World Book Night list. We are ending, or rather bookending. Oh, come on, that was an obvious joke. You must allow me at least one obvious joke. We're bookending with 2 official World Book Night authors. It's a personal pleasure to welcome back one of my guests from last year, Mike Gayle, a sneak preview of a book that has not yet been released, or at least, Mike, I think that's right, so maybe you can clarify that. It's called All the Lonely People. So closing our celebration of World Book Night this evening, Mike Gayle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is wonderful to be part of this amazing night. It's been loads of fun. So just to clarify, this is one of the books. This is the book that's on the World Book Night list, and you can use your Waterstones discount on that. And this currently is my latest book, Half a World Away, and you can also use your Waterstones discount on that. And I thought I'd read for the very first time from my book that's coming out in July. It's called All the Lonely People, and it's about an 84-year-old pensioner, West Indian pensioner called Hubert Bird, and he's very lonely. And it's, I suppose, the story is essentially about how he became lonely and what happens when he starts to open his front door and stop being lonely. And it's got 2 timelines, so there's a current timeline and there's one in the past. And I'm going to read from one of the past chapters, which is dated April 1958. It was Saturday afternoon, and Hubert was draped in an old bedsheet and perched on a rickety dining chair. The dingy Stockwell bedsit belonged to Elwood, a Trinidadian friend of Gus's, who, though he worked in a bakery near King's Cross, styled West Indian hair in his spare time. While only self-taught, Elwood was good at what he did and was able to recreate all the latest styles coming from America and back home, which is why Hubert had sought him out. "So," said Elwood, "what do you want from me today?" Fumbling under the bedsheet, Hubert reached into his jacket, pulled out a picture torn from the pages of a movie magazine, and handed it to Elwood. "Me want to look like this." Examining the image of a smiling Nat King Cole, Elwood frowned. "You do know that to get this look, you're going to have to straighten your hair." Hubert nodded. "It's not a problem." "Are you sure?" asked Elwood. He reached under his bed and took out a jar of congoline from a box and showed it to Hubert. "You know, this stuff is mighty powerful. I've seen fellows lose huge chunks of their hair after using it only once." Hubert swallowed hard. Was the benefit of looking like Nat King Cole worth the risk of losing some hair? He decided it was. "Do what you've got to do." "Fine," replied Elwood, and he glanced towards the picture of Nat King Cole to the comb in his hand. "Well, friend, this isn't a magic wand, and I'm no magician, but if you want to look like Mr. Smooth right here, then I'll give it my best shot." Hubert had never relaxed his hair before, preferring to wear it greased and combed back like most young West Indian men of the time. But this coming week was important, perhaps the most vital of his life, and he needed to make a good impression. Because this was going to be the week he asked out Joyce Pearce. Quite when exactly Hubert's thoughts had shifted from distant admiration to drawing up a plan of action was a mystery even he couldn't fathom. But in a short space of time, he had gone from believing that there was no way a girl like Joyce would go out with him, to becoming convinced that if he just said the right thing in the right way and looked handsome and debonair while doing it, he just might be in with a chance. And so it was with this in mind that Hubert had sought out Elwood. The congoline had burnt his scalp like hell while he was waiting for it to take effect. But when he saw the finished result, Hubert forgot all about the pain in an instant. Okay, so he didn't exactly resemble Nat King Cole, or even Nat King Cole's slightly less attractive brother. But he was in no doubt, with his freshly straightened hair sculpted into a low quiff. There was a new air of sophistication about him. His new hairstyle showed off the sharpness of his cheekbones to best effect, and his freshly trimmed moustache perfectly complemented the fullness of his lips. Joyce Pearce wouldn't be able to resist him. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. As I've said to everybody, ladies and gentlemen, 15 incredible guests, 15 incredible books. It's been an absolute honour to host this and to actually listen to it. Please thank me. Give a huge virtual shout out for all of my guests this evening. Thank you for joining us. I really hope that we can do this again next year, but that we do it face to face. Stay safe, keep reading, and thank you very, very much. Let's give everybody a big thank you and a big wave goodbye. Thanks, everybody.